many streams of intelligence, but he also stated that he thought all along, he made it clear, that there was significant terrorist involvement. And that is not my recollection of what he told us on September 14th. I'm satisfied with the ultimate conclusion he reached. I told him that I honestly disagreed with his recollection of what he told us on September 14th.
That, of course, was Congressman Peteking speaking to reporters on Capitol Hill today following the testimony given by General David Petraeus. The general now back at home after going before two separate closed hearings. The ex-CIA director arrived on Capitol Hill through a secure location this morning, avoiding the media staked out at several entrances to the Capitol. He then met privately with the House and Senate Intelligence Committees and answered questions about the attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi. Senators reacted before the cameras just a short time ago.
We have spent the last 2 hours plus with former Director Petraeus. He laid out his view, which was very much appreciated. He answered a large number of questions.
As the only individual in a leadership position who has been back on the ground in Libya since the incident occurred on September 11, it was very important to get him in. He did have a little bit different perspective on some things and clarified some of the issues that were still a little cloudy.
Joining me now, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Kelly O'Donnell. Things are a little bit still cloudy, I guess was the last reference there. Let's follow the testimony. This wasn't sworn testimony. I'm intrigued by the fact that Congressman King says it was a different recollection than what he had, at least what he heard from General Petraeus today. What does that mean?
Well, and it seems that only Congressman King is focused on this, and meaning senators are not saying the same thing. Basically, what we are hearing from members of the committee is that Petraeus is saying he believed all along that this was the act of terrorists. At the same time, I'm told that there was some concern about were there others who were not directly related in the assault on the consulate who were there who needed to be checked out as well? Would those have been demonstrations, protests, whatever? We now know that there was no protest, but that both things could be true, that there could have been a pursuit of was there just sort of civilian activity going on as well as a terror assault. So what we now understand from talking with members of the committee who are in both parties, that there was a decision made that the very explicit description of this as an act of terror was considered classified, therefore not in the much talked about talking points that Susan Rice and others referred to publicly, where there was a bit more focus, some would say a lot more focus, on the potential for a spontaneous demonstration, the video, that kind of thing. That the piece of this puzzle that was more clearly known by the intelligence community of the involvement of terror groups was classified. And in part, that could be argued as a protection required in order to try to pursue them, that kind of thing. That is new information today and helps to show us how there might have been two tracks happening all along. The public statements that were reflecting part of what they may have known. Right. The real question is, if they knew it was too much suggestion that a video or demonstrations may have been involved, and that's what people see very differently, often based on their political point of view. So
yes, and it has based on political point of view, but the fact of the matter, the information that Susan Rice was provided and what she indicated on Meet the Press and other programs, that would have been a part of the declassified. Is that what you're saying, Kelly? So yes. She's telling exactly what she knew and the facts as she knew them.
That is what we have been told, that both parties do not dispute she was using the unclassified talking points. Right. What we've learned is there had been more talking points, and they were narrowed to the points that she was making. And in the broader section of talking points, there was more explicit discussion of terrorism. Decisions were made. We don't have all the answers as to why that was done. And some will say there might be a political implication. Others say it is an important security measure in order to try to find out who did it, to find them, catch them, and and so forth. So it's some new texture today that adds something to this.
Right.
Republicans have been critical, too, of Susan Rice in a kind of new way today, saying that if she had, in fact, been aware that there was more of a theory about al-Qaeda or other extremist terrorists being involved, that maybe she leaned too far into the discussion of spontaneous demonstration and so forth. That's really a political conversation that people are hashing out. The importance of what was talked about today, I think, is really trying to get to the bottom of what was happening on the ground, what could the CIA, State Department, others have done differently, and what needs to be done for other consulates and embassies in hostile places. So there are really serious issues here, in addition to part of the political conversation that certainly has embroiled Susan Rice.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Kelly. And joining me now, MSNBC military analyst Colonel Jack Jacobs, Molly Ball, national political reporter for The Atlantic. Thank you both. Thanks, Molly, for coming on again. Colonel, it's always a pleasure having you on. You just heard Kelly, Colonel, the classified versus declassified. Over and over today, I've heard people relate this to the weapons of mass destruction, who knew what, when. Nevertheless, at the heart of this, there could have been two tracks here.
There could have been.
And there appears that there were.
And even if they were, trust me, it has always been unambiguous to me as a military man, and I think always unambiguous to anybody who had any military experience, that this was not the result of some spontaneous demonstration. The attack had small arms, automatic weapons, rocket-propelled grenades, and mortars, all in a concerted effort to attack. There's no doubt in my mind, I think anybody else's military mind, that this was a pre-planned attack. And for the White House to say anything other than that is generously, I'd say, economical with the truth.
But the White House, and we know from the presidential debate that this was the hot point where the president said in his Rose Garden comments that this was an act of terror. If you believe that's nuanced or not, nevertheless, the words came out at that point. And the heart of what a lot of the Republicans are saying is that somehow Susan Rice, as Senator McCain referred to her, was not bright or not acting in full capacity of her job the way she should as a U.S. ambassador, but UN ambassador. But nevertheless, Colonel, from what General Petraeus said, and just look at Congressman King, he's saying that General Petraeus is not saying the same information.
Well, it's entirely possible that on the 14th, as Peter King said, and he's probably got a pretty good memory, he got a different story from General Petraeus.
And that's the CIA director at the time. That's not the White House.
But at that time, and General Petraeus had enough military experience to know himself that when you have an attack like this, he spent a lot of time as a young soldier. When you have an attack like this, it is pre-planned, maybe even rehearsed. To say anything else is complete nonsense to a military mind. So if that's the case, Peter King is right, and he got a different story from General Petraeus on the 14th, and General Petraeus was economical with the truth back then, too.
Okay, well, that is a more gentle way of putting it than I think some would. But Molly, let me bring you in on this. Peter King is saying that, as I already said, he got one version from General Petraeus on the 14th and something different he recalls today. What are we to make of this?
Right, and you know, like you say, this is something that came up in the presidential debates. This is a political fight between Democrats and Republicans that the Republicans are not going to let rest. If the White House thought that once the sort of haze of the election was over, that we would all be able to examine this in the clear light of day without politics behind it, we're seeing through these hearings, we saw in the president's press conference the other day, tempers are still flaring very much. This is still very much a political issue, because when you have a terrorist attack on September 11th, before a presidential election, and there is confusion about how the administration is characterizing it, and there are a lot of questions about what happened, you have to wonder whether something political is going on, and I think that's part of what they're trying to get to the bottom of, in addition to all of the other more logistically based stuff.
But what adds, I think, Molly, and just in these last few hours, to the fodder that this is all politics, you've got General Petraeus and Peter King, a man who never bites his tongue, coming out and saying what he heard from General Petraeus today is not what he recalled. But when it comes to Susan Rice, there's a harsher language and assessment regarding what she said on these Sunday morning programs than I feel was taken today regarding General Petraeus, who is now saying all along from the outset he believed that this was a deadly attack on the U.S. diplomatic mission in Benghazi by involving al-Qaeda affiliates.
It sounds like you're suggesting there's some kind of double standard going on. I mean, that's certainly what the president seemed to be saying in his press conference the other day, and I think that's something that a lot of Democrats feel, that there's some unfairness going on here. It seems to me that if you're going to send a top administration official in to testify before Congress, you can't then complain when that person gets made a fall guy. That's sort of why you're sending them in there.
Right. Well, I mean, at this point, and it does boil down to who will the fall guy be, if you will, in this, Colonel. I mean, where does it stop? I mean, or will it at this point? Because in the end, as Molly pointed out, you pointed out, the ultimate responsibility here is to find out exactly what happened. There's real-time video now that they've been privy to. Is this about a fall guy or solutions?
Well, I don't think they're going to be able to. I don't think they're going to be able to find a fall guy. B, they may run out of time altogether. There's lots of important stuff to do right now with respect to the budget, and I think they're going to start focusing their attention on that. There's a good possibility this whole story may just kind of drift away.
How would that be possible? Because you know and I know that there are some who want to keep this going for whatever reason.
They can do, but at the end of the day, it really depends on what gets covered, what gets out there, and who's going to get a platform to talk about it. There's going to be an internal investigation, and after a while, there will be a release of all this information long after the story will have died. But I think this is liable to come up again with Susan Rice if she gets nominated to be Secretary of State. This is all going to come up again, and then it will be accepted.
And Molly, we know it's going to come up again because we know there will be public hearings, which will take on a whole different level.
Right, there will be public hearings, and then there could, as the general said, be a nomination fight, and both sides have signaled is something they plan to dig in their heels on, and that would be an intensely political and I think an intensely controversial nomination if it comes.
You are right if it happens that way. Thank you very much, Molly. Greatly appreciated, Colonel. It's always great to have your